that far and see that. But there's even, I found my grandparents and great-grandparents' homes too. So that's also kind of neat to see that they paid, you know, $3.40 for their tax bill way back when. So now we pay more than that at Starbucks. So that's all I have for my report.
Thank you for that.
I only have a couple things.
Are there any questions?
A couple things rolling. So go ahead,
Supervisor.
So, getting back to the banking portion of this, as I asked previously, and I think for our possible viewers at home, and I do hope there are some, this is something that we are not necessarily obligated by the state to review every now and again, but we do it. Could you talk a little bit about just, is this like a bid process, or?
So there's a couple ways you can go about it. A request for a proposal would be, this is what we need. Can you provide it? Give us a bid, an idea of that. Or there is a state contract out there that the state has negotiated, and if that would provide the things that we need. So really the request for a proposal is, we've been moving along with the bank that we're with through 3 generations of that bank. Extending contracts, extending those things, doing those things. So this is one of the first times that we probably take a look at, okay, here's what we need, who can provide it, can they do all those things? And that's the key, is what do we really need? Now with the sale of Samaritan, our number of accounts went down, but our services might be increasing because of the electronic payments and electronic back and forth. So we just want to make sure that whoever we choose, or we stay where we are, that we're able to do the things that we need to with our banking services.
And follow up to that, I mean, again, kind of for public consumption, it's such a massive undertaking. I don't think people realize approximately how many accounts, not asking for exact amount, but, you know, kind of a ballpark, just how many accounts we're talking about.
Accounts more than 10 and less than 20. But it's all about the transactions that happen as opposed to the number of accounts. So everything pulls into one account, if you will think of it that way. Then it's all on transaction based.
But we're talking thousands of transactions.
We're one of the bigger customers in the area, yes.
So,
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Do you know how much we're getting charged per year for the bank we're at now? Some fees I heard over the years from different companies and stuff like that sometimes you can have pretty hefty bank charges.
Yeah, so we're in that $10,000 to $15,000 range. I'm just off the top of my head per year. In that, what we tend to do is to pull that out of interest earnings of a money market account that we use as a short-term savings account, so to speak. So it's not like they're billing us for that, but we do get an account analysis every month and make sure that we are being charged for what we're using.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? Thank you for your report.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda, item 3C, the master plan update. And for that, we have our Chief of Public Works, Mr. Scott Schmidt. And there is a requested motion for the approval of $24,000 for architectural services. Do we have a motion? We have a motion from Mr. Shadrin and a second from Mr. Kelly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think first, before we get into the master plan in depth, I think a little history is in order because of a new executive committee member since the first of the year, as well as there might be some more new board members that are watching this for the first time. The ones that are here remember that we went through a master plan process in 2023 that was reviewed and approved by the board. As part of that, our elevator that's at the end of this hallway that typically utilized was starting to fail, And based off the master plan location, we installed the elevator at the other end, and I'm glad to say it is now open and running. So if you have a chance after the meeting and want to take a nice little smooth elevator ride, you're more welcome to go down to the right out the door and take that elevator. But I think it's important to know that we have done some work on the master plan already going forward. There's also funding in 2025 for the western parking lot improvements to make that a secured parking lot. But with that, back in February, the executive committee did look at the master plan and options. Set out a couple goals is to get basically the public coming in one location, as well as if you've been to the building during the day, there's people that come in the building and don't know where they're going. They might come in the west entrance, they're looking for the Justice Center, clerk of courts, or they don't know if they're going for the county clerk of courts, and it's just very confusing. So one of the aspects is to get the centralized location for access into the building, as well as a private entrance for staff looking forward. So it was agreed then in March to actually hire an architectural firm to look it up some plans. And the first phase is to get some schematic drawings, and that's what we'll go through tonight. The second phase would be to actually finalize those schematic drawings. When I say schematic drawings, you'll look at them, they'll look very detailed. You'll see offices in there, you'll see workstations in there, chairs, desks, stuff like that. But make no mistake, it's high level still. There's still, if we go forward with the master plan, the architecture firm will have to do stuff like HVAC and sprinkler heads and door sizes, all that kind of stuff. So it's still schematic level. There'll still be chances for changes later on down the road. We look forward to it. That have to just modify areas a little bit. But what we're looking for is saying, will these offices fit in this location? Yeah, do we have file cabinets shown yet? No, stuff like that still has to be worked out. But at a high level, saying that, yep, these will fit. What we did was we hired an architectural firm, and we had meetings with all the departments that could potentially be impacted and look at their space analysis and space needs, not just now, but into the future as well. The architectural firm went back, made some modifications, some changes, some drawings. We met back again with those departments, looked at those. Kara, our building and grounds manager, myself, made some tweaks to them and brought them back to department heads to look at one last time. And if they still needed changes, we went back again to the architectural firm, make some more changes, and that's what you see here tonight. So this has gone through several iterations between myself and Kara, as well as department staff, department heads, any other staff that they may have brought in on the conversation. And so what I'd like to do today is roll through that master plan to show you a little more detail. I apologize for the quality that was in the packet, but hopefully you're all emailed the latest version. And up on the screen, you'll see the overall site plan. In 2025, on the right-hand side of the screen, and I'll try to encircle it as best I can, there's a fuel island that's right there. And that in 2025, the fuel islands at the end of its useful life will be moved over to the highway department. And that project is funded right now in our CIP. What you see is that the west staff parking lot, which I mentioned, where you typically would park for this meeting, would be a staff-only entrance at that entrance in there, as well as down below in the back. And the public would all come through the east side of the building, as you see with the blue line. That's important because that's where they generally go when they want to go to the court system as well. And if you're familiar with it, the sheriff is just north of there as well. So it'd be kind of that one-stop shop, get everybody into that location. If you've been in that side of the building, you know that parking is a premium over there. And so there's some parking lot changes on the east side of the building as well. We'd keep the sidewalk that's there. There's a little cul-de-sac there, would be green space, and this would become a parking lot. Most of the parking lot would remain unchanged. It's a nice flat area right now, so we're not looking at pulverizing the whole parking lot, but obviously just making some minor modifications and making this driveway that's in this location flow smooth and right into the main driveway that you see here. And now it's kind of offset, and you got to go around a little corner. So that's kind of the site. And if you recall from the master plan in 2023, this location where it says public parking would be a potential new building, but we're not talking about the building anytime soon.
Question on the staff parking lot, would that be available for county board as well?
Yes, I was going to get to that. Yes.
All right.
Yes, correct.
I just like the idea that you have a separate entrance.
Yes.
Sometimes we have some relatively contentious things.
Absolutely.
And, from a safety. That's the only question I have.
Sure. Any other questions on kind of I'll call it the exterior potential changes that are coming? again, these are not funded yet. We'll talk about funding later on. And then
Thank you.
looking at the overall plans that you see up on the board, and what I'll do is I'll try to start at the Justice Center entrance. That's on the right side of your screen, or east entrance. If you're not familiar, that's a security entrance for the most part. If you're going into the court system, you go through security. If you're coming into this building, the government center, you're not. What we have there is a little reconfiguration there to have you coming into the doors and going through security. Again, then having a potential overflow security station. And this will be something that you'll be deciding once we start getting deeper into the plans of, do you want everyone that comes into this building on both the Justice Center side and this government center going through security, or just keep it with the Justice Center? Again, that'll be a decision point that you come going. We'll be able to configure it either way. And I'll show you later on that there's disconnections between the building that if you do decide not to have security into this building, or later on you want to do security, you'll have those options. I've been pointing that out there. Right behind there right now, this is where the mailroom would be. It was currently a law library. We'd have some vending machines coming in down the hallway. To your left is where the county clerk would be. That's where the current clinic is. And we'll talk about the clinic in much more detail later on. But what we're looking at doing with this layout is to get some of our high volume, high traffic, foot traffic right near the entrance. And if you're familiar with this building, the county clerk, treasurer, register of deeds are much more of a higher impact as far as traffic is going into. Not as many people coming to see facilities as you can imagine. Even the county executive and the county attorney's now his main office is off of the Justice Center entrance. And so they'd be right in the front of the building, right near security as you come through. So the county clerk would be at that main entrance. The jury assembly room, which now is currently only accessed through the Justice Center. What we're looking at is potentially having doors on the other side along that hallway. And that could potentially be used as a voting location as well, because we don't want to have people coming into West Lot like they do right now and voting right across from the county clerk's office is how the voting currently is. This will provide that voting access, and also that's the part of the discussion about security, because you don't want to have people going through security and voting and that kind of stuff. So that's why this is configured the way it is. Right next to them and down the hall will be the treasurer and register of deeds offices. Again, higher traffic, higher foot traffic volume in those locations. The elevator that we just installed will be down the end of the hallway. So this little square you see down here with the X in it, that's the currently new elevator. The yellow hallway, if you will, would be open to the public. And you have a set of doors which would be right outside here, halfway between the two sets of doors that you see in the county boardroom. The reason for that is public will be able to come in there. There'd be an overflow room just behind us. That would be overflow. If you have a contentious item that maybe people are overflowing here, they'd be right next door to that. And then across your way, we'd also have a little conference room in case we have an overflow to the overflow place that we'd have people that could possibly go. And again, this would be a set of doors here, so that would be the key card access that you'd have. That would be, if you were coming in the secured access, this would be a secured hallway, the brown or tan. So you'd be able to come in the set of doors with the maximum capacity sign. Again, you'd be separated from the public. And then right behind there in the conference rooms across the hall and in the little break room would be where IT and GIS would potentially go. I certainly can move on to the second floor, but I wonder if there's any questions on the first floor. I'd be certainly happy to undertake those.
Anything on the first floor? Looks, for a quick overview, looks great.
Yeah, and I should say we did have a lot of thumbs up from a lot of department heads, and some of them are here tonight, that we had a lot of positive feedback, not a lot of complaints or concerns once we get that done. Again, we got to finalize the plans yet of all other stuff, but move along. The second floor, I'll start at that elevator location. On that side of the east side of the building. Right now, if you come out of there, the IT is there, so we've actually moved community development from the PAC across the street. That's Deb Zilski's office. And right behind there would be potentially be the UW extension. Again, higher traffic, foot traffic that you see in those locations. A conference room, moving the law library upstairs. And if you're familiar, so IT would stay in this centralized location here. The district attorney needed just some minor modifications, expanding a conference room a little bit and adding an additional office. And that little office is storage. Instead of being a workstation, it's now an office and a storage location for the district attorney. So some minor changes for that office. But again, you'd have the yellow hallway would be open to the public. Natural Resources would be in this location, the main door. You come up the hallway, you'll be able to see their main entrance here, as well as all their staff behind there. Facilities, again, as I said, not high traffic, but we need to put them in a location. They would be in this orange-ish red rose colored. That's where the county treasurer used to be. So that's, again, on that second floor down the hallway. The remainder on that second floor where the current clerk is, where the old county board chairs location was, there'd be conference rooms, common spaces. Again, they still have to get reconfigured once we get everything back together. These are perfect sizes. Probably not yet, but just gives you a feel for we'd have some smaller ones, some larger ones. If we need to make that common space larger, even for larger events, we can certainly just say one big common space. And so that's, again, one of those details we work out once we get a little further on down the road. The big thing on the second floor, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, is the clinic location. Again, right off the western entrance would be the private entrance for staff. Again, the tan hallway, they'd be able to enter the clinic in that location. Actually, this location, but we'll look at that location exactly, figure that out. But this would be right where the Veteran Services was, so those offices are empty, as well as this is room 2024. If you're familiar with upstairs, where a lot of the secondary meetings are upstairs, right across from the county clerk's office, that's room 2024, also a voting location. And so obviously if you're looking at moving a clinic, we can move it there because there's nothing there right now except for 2024, and that's where we have to look at the Justice Center and that room if we want to continue voting in this building going forward. We'll circle back to the clinic a little bit later on, but there's enough room there to make that happen. Any questions on the second floor as we look at that? Again, the restrooms were just recompleted, all ADA compliant, so we're looking at leaving those in those locations.
Would the plan be then to, on the south entrance by the break room, those doors would just be eliminated?
That'd be open for discussion. It might be key card access. It might be a nice place for a patio. The break room would be people to go to eat.
Okay.
Right now, several of the offices, they eat in their offices. This gives them a chance to, the break room downstairs doesn't get utilized very often because a lot of public is there and asking questions while people are eating. This being behind the doors, might get used hopefully a lot more. And it might be nice to have a patio. That's currently out there right now, kind of a concrete area out front and desk. So we thought, well, why not leave that and have a patio and maybe some picnic tables out there if people want to go outside to eat. And this little canopy. Yep. Third floor is not as exciting. Some modifications. We worked with the outgoing clerk of courts and the current interim clerk of courts, or whatever her official title is. They've been going through some downsizing as far as file size in their office, and so we'll be able to get some conference rooms upstairs as well. And so they're willing to give up some area, as you see, pretty significantly to put some common space. Again, office space is what we'll be looking for. Conference rooms we'll be looking for up there to be used again by clerk of courts could use it, HR could use it, executive, anybody in the building could use that office space. And with that, there'd be a nice long hallway here that currently right now, if anyone from this area wants to get to the county attorney's office, it's a challenge because there's a back door, and then they have to go through the Justice Center or around to get through there or another department. This would provide a hallway. Again, we'd have the doors are not shown at the other end or at this end, that the county attorney could get into this building a little easier, and their staff, if they want to come through the secured entrance, could get into this way as well. It'd be key card access there as well. So there'd be a hallway created between there, between the clerk of courts and the county attorney, so that they'd have access again. And those doors would probably be at this location, right near the elevator, and this would be probably a private hallway going north. And they didn't put this left hallway as tan, so that would be tan hallway. That would be, and there'd be a set of doors up there because it'd be a public and private side on that. So you understand that there would be so the public would be able to come in and get down to the county executive's office, get into HR, but not all the way through. They can't get down the stairs and into those other private areas we just talked about, like IT and GIS, and where you're coming in for your board meetings. They just forgot to tan that in.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee on the third floor?
Okay.
Carry on.
Okay. And so what I want to talk to you about tonight, then, the remainder of the agenda is to look for utilizing funding for the clinic design. That is looking at $24,000 to move the clinic. With that being said, that is kind of the first step. Again, We got to move something first, and since those areas are empty, that we'd be moving the clinic first. But what you are committing to in general is that currently, as the building is set up, we don't need to move the clinic. The clinic hasn't been there very long. There's no need to move the clinic right now. Why you would move the clinic is as first phase of the master plan. And knowing that the budget, which we'll talk to in a second, is $5.2 million in round numbers. So what you're doing is essentially by approving the architectural services now, again, we probably won't sign that contract for a couple of weeks. Let's go to the county board with the master plan, and then we'd start in on design work for the for the clinic move at that point. But with that being said, we'll be looking at coming back to the committee and to the board in January, February of next year to potentially borrow the $5.2 million to fund the master plan and what you see here tonight. There could be an interim step to actually fund the clinic later this year. We'd have to look at what funding that is, whether it's our general fund transfer or another source. But potentially shortly after that borrowing is done, we could start in on the clinic move and get the process going. We are looking at about a 2-year process for actually all the construction that you see here because it's a stepped process. As you can imagine, you got to move the clinic first before you can move the clerk downstairs. You have to create new facilities office before you can move the register of deeds. So it'll be a lengthy and loud process here in this building. But that's what we're looking for tonight. And just to make sure you're more than clear, and those that are watching, this is step one, but you are certainly saying that we're very interested in the next steps down the road.
Very well. We'd recognize Chairman Schleif. If you're muted, please unmute. Very well. So the motion that's on the up for discussion right now, as provided by Mr. Schotter and seconded by Mr. Kelling, is to provide $24,000 of strategic priority funding for architectural services. So this is really the master plan for this building. What is the long range plan
Certainly.
overall for the county?
Certainly. If you remember back from the Potter Lawson plan, and if I could just slide back to the site plan, would be at some point, again, this is called step one, if you will, this whole thing we talked about this evening, will be to put a building in this location here, where the public parking is, that east parking lot. That would house human services, health department, ADRC, veteran services. And again, by doing that, you have one location where everybody's driving to. No, they're not all in one building, but they'd be close enough where everybody's driving to the same location off of Rolfs, coming in and going, okay, this is where I got to be. Sheriff there, Justice Center, Government Center, and called Human Services Building, for lack of better terminology, all right there. So it'd be kind of a one-stop shop versus now where people are coming into the western parking lot. They're maybe going over to the PAC. I was just over at the PAC looking at weeds, and someone's over there driving around looking for the Register of Deeds. So it happens. It's very confusing. Even that public agency center, it's got an entrance on one floor along 33, an entrance down below. People get very confused, even that building. And I said, if you spend any time in this building, you'll get asked or look at people who are very confused and want to know where they're going.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So let's play off of that.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. Because, obviously the public, as well as I'm sure you board members, will have these questions. So I want to be able to give them good information. From the 30,000-foot view, what is it that we're actually trying to accomplish with this? And obviously one of them is to reduce confusion with our customers.
Right.
People that are coming. And I think another one would be to address some of our security
Yes.
concerns, as well as making our space use more efficient.
Yes.
So
Yes.
far.
You're hitting all the nails right on the head. Yes.
So, and is there more you could add to that?
Not much. I think you hit almost my head. I think it's making use of our space. Like I said, we've got some office space here that's not being utilized a little bit across the street, but for most part, it's utilized pretty good across the street. But making the most use of this building, consolidating, getting like services near each other. I think is very beneficial. And again, for that public-facing thing, it's huge. They can come in one location. If there's a security guard there, they get direction right away, how to go, where to go, stuff like that. So saying that you want to come to the county do business, here's where you go. Everybody goes to the same spot. They have the same starting location within a basically parking lot, and then they can go from there. I think that consolidation.
And then, aside from that, the PAC building basically and essentially will be moved over here, thus reducing our footprint. With the possibility of maybe parceling that land off in the future. Would that be accurate?
That would be 100% correct. Yes, I should have mentioned that. That's a fantastic point. It does get us out of most of the south side. If that PAC building moves over here, that the land we just sold to Samaritan and obviously the homeless shelter, but the remainder of the parcel could be sold off or developed or done something else with at that time. So it's another opportunity for getting land back on the tax roll for the county.
And I think that's an important thing also, is that it goes back on the tax roll, and therefore it becomes a producing property once again for the citizens of West Bend and certainly for Washington County, their school districts.
Yes.
So adding this money in is really a way of making us more efficient, making us smaller, and putting land back on tax rolls.
It's definitely a long-term investment, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shadron.
Now, with regards to that overall budget, I noticed they have a 6% contingency. Do you feel with PRA, I've worked with PRA in the past too.
Yes.
With the current issue we've had with budgets, I think we should bump that up to 20 or. Is that good?
I think.
Costs have gone up, and I know the elevator, of course, was Exhibit A.
Correct. I think when we get closer to that discussion in January, February, I think we can look at that final number, whether it's 5.2 or a little bit higher. As you know, anytime you put a contingency on there, that's kind of a security blanket, and we take it very seriously to try to not to use that contingency when and if at all possible. But when you are talking a building of this age and size and location, the one great thing is that PRA does have the knowledge of the building now, having done the remodeling down at the first floor for the elevator, as well as all the way up to the third floor in the county attorney's suite. So, and just using these recent numbers, they have numbers that are live, basically data of what we just did in the building. So, again, we see what the economy does between now and then, and elections and everything else. The numbers could certainly swing up a little bit, but we're feeling pretty comfortable when we looked at these numbers with them, alongside them, going, yeah, this is what our price per square foot was for these areas. We've done this work just now. We didn't look just at our low bid either to make sure we weren't just doing that. That project went really well for us, and we didn't use hardly any contingency. So we're
So the exercise is taking updating the numbers.
absolutely would be updating those before it comes to the board again. But we're feeling pretty solid right now.
We've been great, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, the motion under discussion right now is whether the executive committee should approve $24,000 of strategic priority funding for the architectural services for the clinic move. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3D, 2024 resolution general fund transfer, UWM-WC maintenance of building and grounds. As you'll recall, this item came up in the past and was postponed to this meeting until we could be a little bit more certain about what was going on in our relationship with the city of West Bend. It's my understanding that a meeting has been set, or an invitation for a meeting has been set for a discussion with the city of West Bend. It's also my understanding that the county executive is positive. It has a positive feeling about moving forward and certainty about it, and would encourage us to pass this at this moment. Is there anything I've said to this point that is unclear or a misrepresentation either from Chief of Public Works or Finance
No.
or Chief of Staff?
No.
Very well. So we would entertain a motion then.
Motion first.
Yes, sir.
Well, take your second and I'd like this.
We have a motion from Mr. Kelling and a second from Supervisor Schultheis. Any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have had conversation with the mayor, and it was very encouraging. And I do believe that he is certainly in support of coming together and meeting. I think he does certainly understand some of the problems and the things that we need to talk about, the concerns that we have with the building and where it may lead, those types of things. So I'm highly encouraged, and I'm very hopeful that the rest of the common council will join the mayor and be as enthusiastic about getting together as he was and really working together to solve this issue for the city of West Bend and certainly for Washington County. So with that, I do believe he will be here and we can start discussing this. And I would be in favor of moving this motion forward.
Thank you. Supervisor Shadrin.
Real quick question, and I know I think we talked about this before when it came up in Public Works, but as we move forward, the monies that we're spending, we're tracking this, right? So that
Yes.
when we get in the conversation with the city of West Bend, we know, okay, we've spent X dollars so far.
Yes.
That's all I want to know, because that might come up in the future. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I still do have concerns with the wording of the resolution. I would prefer that it state that costs will shift to the owners as opposed to shifting to the county, both in whereas 2 and whereas 3. Also that I understand we are having positive conversations with the city and city representatives, and that's great. I would want to reserve county's clarity that if funds are not agreed upon, that may be reduced from sales tax sharing. But that could be, adjusted in a final resolution. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps it might be something that Attorney Stern could enlighten us on. So this is written into the resolution that, the way you said it, to the county. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we take full responsibility for it. It only means that we're actually budgeting the money to it, and that the owner is still responsible, meaning 22% the city of West Bend and certainly the rest to us. So I think we're covered if that's your concern. I'm seeing acknowledgement.
Is that correct understanding?
Attorney.
There are agreements in place that designate financial responsibility contracts, if you will, that do speak to that. And so, and I'm sure that'll come as part of the meeting as well. But there are legal documents signed by both parties that indicate financial responsibility on the part of both parties to cover certain costs.
Thank you.
And I also believe then, as part of this meeting, we could certainly negotiate those responsibilities as well. Okay, so and certainly for your and for the general public as well, that that might be one of those things where we could use it as a carrot. I know the city is not exactly loaded with cash, but we may be able to do some kind of working together and solve some of these problems. So.
Thank you for that input, and thank you, Attorney Stern. Supervisor Shadrin.
If I could add to that, that was my point as well. As we're tracking this moving forward, it's just something that we can show them that, hey, this is what we're spending money on. And however we deal with it in the future, it's just there, and it's included. So, thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, then all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 3E, ordinance to amend section 15-1 relating to supervisory districts. Do we have a motion?
Thank you.
From Supervisor Shadrin, second from Supervisor Schultheis. Is there any necessary background information or any questions on this item?
We certainly have questions.
So this is my agenda item. the supervisory districts. It's just a cleanup, really. So the state had to adopt a new plan for all of the Senate and Assembly districts based upon the Supreme Court's decision that the prior maps were not to be utilized any longer. So they adopted Governor Evers's maps, and these additions to the ward plans for our municipalities are due to the Assembly or Senate district lines cutting through wards that were already created after the census in 2020. And so you can't have an Assembly district. You can't have two Assembly districts or two Senate districts in a ward. You have to have separate wards based on state statute reporting requirements. And so that is why our municipalities did have to split some of those. And I do want to thank our GIS department, Eric Damcott specifically, because he worked hand in hand with those municipalities to help them come up with their new adjusted wards, newly created wards for their municipalities, and in a very short time frame, because we needed them before June 1st.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So does this, in effect, actually change any of the supervisors' districts as far as boundaries go?
No, none of the supervisors' districts change. It's really just the description that falls under your supervisory districts. The wards that are within them are still the same. They're just numbered differently because we had to make splits because of the Assembly and Senate district lines crossing through. It's based really on reporting for election results. You have to be able to split them and have separate reporting units for each of those districts.
Supervisor Chabrin.
I thought in the past you couldn't split a ward.
You can. In this instance, you have to. You split it and you create a new ward number. This happens typically between censuses when you have annexation. So like if the city of Hartford were to annex a portion of the town of Hartford, if it is a different supervisory district than what's contiguous with it, we have to create a new ward number because, again, for reporting for election results, you can't have one ward sharing a supervisory district or Assembly or Senate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions or comments? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Moving on to item 3F, ARPA funding for early childhood development workforce initiatives. Do we have a motion and a second on this item? Oh, got it. Then,
All right.
Mr. Dahl, if you would please proceed with background information.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. So the report in the packet is fairly self-explanatory. Just a couple of points. So this would be $100,000 of ARPA going to the West Bend Community Foundation. Those dollars would be pooled with contributions from the West Bend Community Foundation themselves and the Greater Milwaukee Foundation as well. So in total, about $300,000 for this programming. So this is early childhood workforce development initiatives. So engaging and training current and future child care workers is basically the gist of that. The Community Initiatives Committee, that's a committee of the West Bend Community Foundation, is charged with making recommendations on programming and metrics and recipients and things like that. We have representation on that committee. Chief Community Development Officer Jamie Ludovic is on that committee, so we've got some representation there for how to allocate those dollars and track and apply some metrics and things like that. So that was the extent of what I wanted to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you for that information. Are there any questions from the committee? Are there any concerns from the committee? We'll take that as consensus then.
Great. Thank you very much.
Next item is item 3G on the agenda, Next Generation Housing Framework Updates.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, welcome.
So we have changes to the NGH 2.0 framework. I'll just go through these real quick. The first one is the multifamily price point. We talked about this a little bit at our last meeting. The advisory committee did look this over, had quite a discussion, and the recommendation is that the multifamily only next-gen housing developments may opt to set 100% of the owner-occupied dwelling units at a unit sale price for under $350,000. They have an opportunity to really choose two different options, that option or the original tiered structure for the price points. The second main change is the allowance of minor exceptions to the price points at the discretion of this committee. This would be on a project-per-project basis. The developer or builder would have to provide some written explanation describing the unusual circumstances that would warrant an exception to this. The third is just some additional clarification language to the tax increment financing, just making sure that it's clear that if there's a development that's within a TID but is not utilizing the TID increment, that they are eligible for that $20,000 per owner occupied. On the third page, we are expanding the language on financial obligations, adding that builders and developers need to be in good standing with the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions. And then points 5, 6, and 7 are really just some minor edits that needed to be cleaned up. So do you have any questions?
Thank you for that background information. As we take these, why don't we start with number 1 first. Did anyone have any questions or comments on number 1, which was?
Chairman, we need a motion in a second.
Thank you. I neglected to do that. Thank you for your direction. Do we have a motion? Supervisor Schultheis, and a second, Supervisor Kelling. Now, to item number 1, did anyone have any questions on that item?
Yeah, so, I don't know, I guess, you know, I honestly, I'll tell you, I was reading this last night after a 12-hour day. And, ooh, my head almost exploded. Number 1, what's the bottom line as far as selling these units?
The bottom line with the $350,000, it's really just that multifamily development would have an option that all of the units would be under $350,000. So instead of meeting the single family price points, because we have, 40% at $340, 40% at $360, and then, everything under $420, that it's the multifamily, there's a really good chance that although there are some variety, let's say with 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom homes, generally with the multifamily, it's about the same costs. So just the allowance that, everything under that 350 would be approved.
I know you, as a lawyer, you can't write that. You got to write it like this. But thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
Now I got it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on item 1? Going on to item 2. Any questions, comments on that one? Supervisor Kelly.
Once again, it's a 12-hour day. Is there kind of an example that you could possibly give us why there would be?
Sure, absolutely. So let's say that someone has a 40-acre parcel, but there's a portion that has high bedrock, and there has to be, or let's say a significant elevation change where they're able to put next-gen housing units on it, but there's going to be a unique circumstance that is present that warrants that, maybe they can't meet that 420 because of the high bedrock or because of this elevation change. I wouldn't want them to come to me and say, oh, that's too bad, I think that there's circumstances that really warrant a conversation beyond just the community development department, looking at the price points and saying no, that we would look at those, that the builder or developer would have to provide us with written reasoning, and then we would be able to forward that and have that conversation with the advisory committee and with this committee.
Okay, and then, so if they have, say, an unusual problem with the actual development of the land, that might be an example.
Yes.
So I guess what I'd be concerned with here, I like the idea of it, and it makes a lot of sense. I get, would it be fair to say then that this committee could kind of be heading off any abuses where everybody's got a special circumstance
Right.
now?
So what we talked about at the advisory committee is framing this in the framework, very similar to what the BOA has, where they actually have like a 3-level test. What is the actual hardship? And I think there's I'm sure there are. Attorney Stern should be able to rattle those off, but there are 3 kind of tests, and we're going to look at those and kind of frame up what makes sense for those unusual circumstances to warrant it moving forward for discussion. So not everyone would be able to say, oh, well, I really just want these to be a higher price point, so I want this exception. There would be certainly things that are warranted for that discussion to happen.
So it would have to be well qualified by these 3 questions. in order to
yeah.
get to this committee. I think that would be great. Thank you.
Supervisor Shotron.
Thank you. So if you run into those difficult situations with, a difficult land piece or something, if it drives the cost of the housing too high, would it behoove the next generation housing to maybe say, maybe we shouldn't consider this area?
Absolutely.
Because it's just
Yeah.
going to push the cost so high, it's not going to serve the purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Schulteis.
I was just going to build on to, thank you, Chair, on what you were saying and what we discussed. Under the terms of the variances, the typical variances are the 3 tests that she talked about at the advisory meeting on Monday. So same question came up. So following the variance kind of thing. So it's not just people trying to find something that
Drive up the price.
Right,
It's exactly
right.
contradictory to what we're trying to do.
right.
Thank you for those comments. I just had one question. Did you say during your presentation that it was going to be subject to review by NGH and
And this committee.
this
Correct.
committee? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think with those parameters, I don't see a problem. Anything else on 2 before we move on to 3? Item 3, any questions there? Supervisor Kelling.
I do apologize. I guess, so with TID districts, you could dumb this down a bit for me. So how are they collecting money from the TID? And can you kind of just go over that a little bit?
Sure. And one of the follow agenda items that are coming up actually will utilize a TID. So instead of, as it stands now, for next generation housing, the county invests the $20,000 incentive per owner occupied unit. So, for example, in the village of Jackson, we provided the $2 million to the village to do the infrastructure. When the homes are built and sold, then and this is actually tied to a lien. A lien is put on those properties, and then the lien is satisfied by the homeowner when they purchase the property, and then those funds get revolved back into the Next Generation Housing Fund. So with a TID, if you're utilizing the TID incentive, instead of the homeowner paying that back, It's actually the TID, the increment from the TID, that will reimburse the county incentive, plus interest on that, because the developer would be getting those funds up front.
Okay, but I mean, the whole idea, so you're saying that they wouldn't be able to use that?
What this clarification means is that if there is a development that is in a TID, but is not actually utilizing the increment, they would still be eligible for the $20,000 per owner occupied that the homeowners would pay back and reimburse the county, as opposed to the scenario that I just went over where their TID pays back
Right,
the
so
fund.
they're not eligible under a TID district, but they would be if the TID was only for like site development, but not the 20,000 down payment.
Yeah, and the Oaks of Jackson, again, is actually a very good example. That is within a TID. But those next generation housing funds are not being paid back by the TID. They're being paid back by the homeowner. So this is just clarifying language just to make sure that everyone understands that if they're in a TID, they're still eligible for next generation housing.
And when you set this up, because that was kind of the idea, was that people need to have roots, they need to have, skin in the game in this community. So having a TID paying it back kind of defeats that purpose. Is that correct?
Well, I really wouldn't put it in that perspective. I think that, putting the roots down in a community is really, who's paying back the funds is kind of irrelevant to people putting roots in a community. And I think that, with the Heart and Homestead program, that's where those new home buyers are really contributing to the community and with their volunteer time.
Thank you.
Anything else on item 3? Moving on to item 4. Item 5, 6, 7. We got through. All right.
Those were pretty easy.
All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 3H, Next Generation Housing Funding Request by A&N for Skyway Park to use permit fee incentive. And we have a motion and a second on this item. Motion from Supervisor Kelling and second from Supervisor Shadron. Care to share any background information on this one?
Absolutely.
Please do. Thank you.
Very quickly, so the request is by A&N. They are the ones who are developing the Skyway Park subdivision. It's the 7 next generation housing lots. The request is for the remaining 3 lots for the permit incentive, and we talked about this at our last meeting. It's $6,000 per owner occupied. So those 3 units. What I really wanted to talk about, though, is you look at the second page. So just determining what fees are defined by that safe and material construction of the residential dwelling unit, and then eligible for the fee incentive. Those that are eligible are highlighted in yellow based on how we define that. But I really just wanted to point out, and this is something that we have certainly been talking about for the last couple of years with Next Generation Housing, which is the cost of the permits. And so these are the permits that are for one of these homes. If you look on the third page, you can see that the total permitting fees for one of these homes is $11,655, which is very substantial. And again, all of those costs are put right towards the cost of the home that people are purchasing. In terms of the eligibility for our permit fee incentive, 9,754 eligible, but again, we have a cap of $6,000.
Thank you for that clarification, for that information. Are there any questions or comments? Again, the motion is to approve $18,000 funding for A&N contracting. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? That motion carries. Next item, 3I, Next Generation Housing request by Regal Place. Do we have a motion and a second on this item, please? We have a motion from Supervisor Schultheis, second from Supervisor Kelling. Carry on, please.
Yep, so Regal Place LLC is requesting $960,000 from the Next Generation Housing Fund. And this is one of the example that I had talked about that is part of a TID, and that TID increment will be paying that back to the Next Generation Housing Fund. This is actually an extremely unique private-public partnership. And it really checks a lot of the boxes of the county goals for economic vitality. This is a infill development where there's existing infrastructure, redevelopment to a higher and better use. There's a potential for brownfields in here, so we're utilizing brownfield funds for the assessment and demolition of the building, as well as any potential cleanup if there's any contamination that's found, as well as, checking the box for next generation housing. It's going to be providing 48 new units. So if approved, we'd have a total of 158 of our 1,000 units. That is our goal. So. Do you have any questions?
Any questions or comments from the committee? Supervisor Shadrin.
So that 960,000, does this fit into what we've been budgeting for the whole program?
Yes.
Not
Yes,
that
it
we're
is.
pulling more and more, or it's getting costlier, so I know we.
No, we actually have $5 million available.
Perfect. Okay, so we are within our goal yet, so.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? That motion carries. Item 3J, Brownfields County Assessment Fund request by Regal Place LLC. Do we have a motion and a second on this item, please? Supervisor Shadrin and Supervisor Schultheis.
All right. So this is also the Regal Place LLC. This is the same property that you just approved for the Next Gen Housing Fund. This is the brownfield component for doing Phase 2 environmental assessment and hazard and material testing. The total project cost is $72,000. But as with our county assessment fund, there's always a 20% match. So Regal Place LLC will be doing that 20% match for a total request of funding of $57,811. And I do want to point out, although the full amount is being requested for approval, based on the results of the Phase 2 testing, there's currently a hold on doing the hazard and material testing. This is the asbestos and lead type testing of the site until Regal Place LLC understands the full extent of any contamination that's on the site.
Very good. Are there any questions? Supervisor Kelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we do these brownfield things, I mean, I don't know if this is an exact cost or if this is over the amount. Is this a quote or is this?
Yes, it's a quote. If you look further in on the packet, you'll see the proposal by Stantec. And they have on page 4 of their proposal at the bottom, you will see the probable cost and the schedule. So this is usually a not to exceed $72,264, and then what specifically is covered in that. So the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5.
Yeah, so you get the probable costs and stuff like that.
Yeah. There has been instances, depending on what they have found with the initial testing, that they need to come back for additional funding to do some supplemental. That has happened on numerous occasions because it's a potential brownfield site and you don't really know what you're going to find until you actually do the testing.
Right, and then I guess that's where I was going with it. Is
Yep.
it's going to be under that amount? And if so, then what? Is it going to be over that amount?
Potentially.
So then what?
Yeah.
So
Yep, and it may, this project may come back, let's say if there is contamination found, but it's a reasonable amount, to do a remedial action plan where they determine how to clean that site up, and then potential more funding for the cleanup itself. It's a process. Brownfields are a process. So.
Supervisor Shadron.
Thank you. Every question that Supervisor Kelly asks prompts a question from you. So if this ends up being too contaminated, does Plan A, we approved before, go away, or do you think we just clean it up and move forward? I mean,
And
obviously, we don't know what's there, but what if what's there
Right.
is big?
And that will be a discussion and a decision by Regal Place LLC.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, sir.
That led me to a question. Brownfields, I've been involved on the board now for a couple of these cleanup sites and stuff like that. Are we still in good health with our funding for our brownfield sites?
We are. Yes.
That's my big concern, because we got a real mess on our hands. I'm sure we actually have funding.
Absolutely. Yep.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you for your hard work and your presentation.
Thank you.
Our next meeting date is set for Wednesday, August 21st, 2024 at 4 p.m. Thank you for your interest and dedication to the citizens of Washington County. Certainly appreciate your efforts.